But first, God, what have we done to deserve such premiers? Bullies, cowards, self-serving political apparatchiks, causing misery and destruction, preying on people's fears, trampling on their rights, just to big themselves and to win the votes of the timid and the savage. What are they doing to their country, to you? Example 1, this woman, the Premier of Queensland, Annastacia Palaszczuk. How dare she? Palaszczuk has imposed the most insane and irrational and destructive border bans on visitors to her state because she knows these are popular with voters who have been scared witless about the virus. In fact, Queensland had 8 new infections yesterday itself. 8. New South Wales today, just 7 in a population of 7.5 million people. But there is Palaszczuk pretending New South Wales people are so diseased they must stay out. And so, Mark Keanes, dying of cancer in Brisbane, was not allowed to have more than one of his 4 sons visit him from New South Wales before he died. Probably, they think, before Christmas. What kind of brutal regime would do something like that to an Australian citizen? Force a dying man to choose which of his 4 children he'd most love to be with him in his last days. It's a Sophie's choice. It makes me sick. Thank God today they must have been shamed by some publicity into saying, well, all the kids can come provided they dress all day in PPE gear, full PPE gear. We count that almost as a blessing now. What kind of government? Well, I'll tell you what kind of heartless, selfish, authoritarian regime would do something like that. It's the same one that took 3 weeks to tell this woman, Sarah Caisip, that, okay, she could come from the ACT to visit her dying father. In fact, they took so long to say yes, but by the time they did, Sarah's father had died without seeing his daughter.
By the time they got back to me for the approval, Dad had already passed away, so...
Now, at this point, any decent government would have died of shame. Died of shame. And not just because of its lack of compassion, but also because of its absolutely pointless cruelty. The risk that Sarah posed to Queenslanders, fellow Australians, it's 0. She lives in the ACT. It's had no new infections there for 2 months. Queenslanders posed a bigger risk to her than she to them. But if that wasn't mean enough, stupid enough, pointless cruelty enough, get this. Sarah was sitting in a quarantine hotel in Queensland, wanting to go to her father's funeral, see her mum, her younger sister, at 2 o'clock today. But those stupid little functionaries in the Queensland government, those by-the-book bureaucrats that staff every tyranny, then told Sarah, well, no, we'll let you in to see your dad. Well, we gave you permission to come in to see your dad when he was alive, but now he's dead. You can't go. Now, can you imagine the minds of the kind of people who'd make a decision like that? And they have power over millions. And that's because they're given that power by people like Annastacia Palaszczuk. At this point, you would think that the Premier must now, surely, be so mortified, horrified by what she'd done, she and her functionaries, to this grieving daughter. But again, you would be wrong. The shamelessness of these politicians. And don't worry, I'm coming to Daniel Andrews next. Well, the Prime Minister heard about this scandal. You heard him just on Peter Credlin's show, excellent interview. He heard about this scandal and this morning pleaded in a private phone call to the Queensland Premier, please, please have some pity. Please, please let Sarah go to this funeral. Make an exception. She wouldn't listen to him, so he said it again on radio.
Well, this is a heartbreaking story. It was brought to my attention early this morning, and so I rang the Premier this morning, and I've appealed to her to overrule a decision that would allow Sarah to go to the funeral today. And to be honest, it's not about borders, it's not about federation, it's not about politicians, it's not about elections. The only thing that matters today is that Sarah can be with her 11-year-old sister Isabel and her mother Myrna while they mourn the passing of their father and husband Bernard at Mount Gravatt today. That's the only thing that matters today. And this is a heartbreaking case. And I know that in Queensland, people support there being borders and all those things. It's not about that today. It's about ensuring that in this case, that Sarah, who I spoke to earlier today, and just to encourage her, that she has the opportunity to go and do that. She's from the ACT. She's a Queenslander, I understand, and she moved to the ACT earlier this year. And sadly, she wasn't able to see her father.
But here comes the ultimate shame of Annastacia Palaszczuk. The final cruelty. Not only did a bureaucrat still turn a deaf ear, still ban Sarah from the funeral and her family, the most they would then do was to let her inspect her dad's body in a coffin alone, uncomforted. Then the Premier actually had the utter gall, the monstrous egotism, to then go into Parliament and claim that of all the people in this tragedy, it was she, the Premier, who was the real victim here. She'd been the victim of bullying by the Prime Minister. Oh, the pain that she'd gone through of having this bully appeal to her for mercy.
I will not be bullied, nor will I be intimidated.
Order.
By the Prime Minister of this country, who contacted me this morning and who I made very clear to the
Member
fact
Everton will put his comments through the chair.
That it was not my decision, that I would pass the information on to the Chief Health Officer, and it is the Chief Health Officer's decision to make.
Get out, Premier. Resign already. If you interpret a plea for mercy to a grieving daughter as a threat to you, as bullying, you cannot be trusted with your great power. You are not fit to be a leader of a great Australian state.